What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is You're the Vet. Thanks for tuning back in. I'm Robert Graves, and I am bringing to you just another veteran who's gone through the process of transition that has a story to share with you. So You're the Vet is a platform that I created to bring vets on that have gone through the process of transition, that have gone through the trials and tribulations of trying to figure out how to live again, how to reintegrate, how to find a job, how to find a place, how to find themselves. And this guest that I'm about to bring on today, James Klarenbach Jr., I know him personally, and when you talk about trying to find yourself, this guy right here, this guy is the guy to go to because he's just in the mindset of healing minds. So James is a retired chief petty officer, but not only is he that, he's a father, he's a mentor, he's a motivation coach, and he's a certified hypnotherapist. James owns Inwards Hypnosis. You can find him at inwardshypnosis.com or email him at inwardshypnosis@gmail.com or james.klarenbach@gmail.com. But besides all that, James and I actually both met at HMI, which is the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. And throughout that whole process, we got to know each other and we got to understand each other a little bit better because not only did we have the connection of being veterans, but we had the connection of, trying to learn about ourselves and take what we can heal from our military life and our own personal lives and then help those coming out and work with them to mentally get them on the right track so they can get back into it. So throughout this conversation, we talk about a few things. James brings up topics such as not being a good match for a company and vice versa, the atmosphere, the people, the energy, scripting your life, the will to meaning. We talk about working towards your visions and letting your visions work for you. We talk about the law of attraction. We talk about intentional focus and reinventing yourself for success at every new duty station, which is not just something that you can do while you're serving, but anywhere you move. If you move from, Idaho City to Bangladesh, you have the opportunity to reinvent yourself. And so we talk about the complexity of starting over. And we also get into things like body syndromes and hypnotherapy and guided imagery. And this conversation is really good. And it may seem a little foo-foo and a little hippie, but I beg you to stick around. I promise that you'll learn something, and it may pique your interest into what exactly James does for a living. So with that being said, this is James Klarenbach. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So, James, I'm excited to have you on the show because you and I have met and went to school together for about a year, and we saw each other in the process of our own transitions, and then in the process of trying to help others get through transition, and not necessarily veterans, but just people in general. So I'm excited to have you on today because I know that you're a man with a plan, and not just a plan, but a presence. So welcome to You're the Vet.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Robert. It's been an incredible journey.
An incredible journey. So I'd like to start off, the format is I kind of just want to bring people on and have them tell their story of their pre-military service, their military service, and then post-military service. So who was pre-James? Who was pre-military James? Or who was pre-Chief Petty Officer Klarenbach?
Well, he was a young man who actually was the son of, my parents were like migratory. They were nomadic, if you will. We moved up the West Coast progressively ever further north. I grew up in conflict. There was a lot of conflict in my family and in my life when I was growing up, having moved and not being able to make friends like everyone else, who's pretty much glued down to one place and one school. I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. The fewer locations you're in, the better chances you have with friends and acquaintances and growth, I see.
Were you a military brat? Is that why?
No, I was not a military brat. I think my father was just running from things that he had mistakenly encountered in his life. And so we were drugged along with him, sadly, and ended up in Washington State after moving from Canada. We went as far north as Vancouver, BC, and then back into Washington State.
Nice.
There I graduated and decided quickly that it was time for me to make a change. Luckily for me, I had two very, very wonderful grandfathers and their supportive grandmothers. They were both military men, both served in World War II. One was an Airedale, and the other was a Naval Seabee.
Mm-hmm.
And it was their stories that spawned my imagination to maybe lead a different life, or to challenge myself in a greater way, because, the propensity of following him in my father's footsteps was very likely. In fact, it was highly likely, and I just couldn't see doing that. So I joined the service and was shipped directly over to Japan.
Were you guys, you and your grandfather, were you guys extremely close?
Very close. Both grandfathers and I were very close.
So that's why
they were my mentors.
Gotcha. That's why you say you have the propensity to kind of follow in their footsteps.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. And what kind of stories did they share with you that pushed you towards the military side?
Well, I was a person who observed things that were taking place, and I came to conclusions based on observations. It was kind of like looking at math problems with actions and words being the denominators in the problem, and then seeing the sum as what a person was experiencing. Kind of,
mm-hmm.
kind of like what we do now in both of our fields. But I was observing what my grandfathers talked about in their life in the military, albeit 4 and 6 years. I looked at what they were doing, and then I looked at the men who they'd become and what they were engaged in. It was always more positive than what I'd seen at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that really struck me, especially when I remember my grandfather telling me things like, always work harder than you're paid.
Mm-hmm.
Always be willing to do more than you're asked. There's always a brighter side to everything that you experience.
Mm-hmm.
And those things were profound for me. And I remember holding that true for myself as a real quiet, person growing up. That was very, very important to me.
Yeah. And did you work? Did you work before going in? Was being active and employed something that was important to you prior to enlisting?
Yes, as soon as in high school, I worked for a funeral home, so I was working. I mean, I was living in northeastern Washington, and there wasn't a whole lot of commerce and things like that. So I did work. I worked at a restaurant for a while. I worked in a funeral home, which wasn't a very pleasant job, but it was a job.
I can imagine.
And then I just found myself looking for places that could get me to the lands that my grandfather spoke of, the South Pacific, Asia, to Europe and such.
They got out, those two, and what did they end up doing after their tours?
Well, my father's father was an electronics technician way back in World War II as a Seabee, and he got out and he ended up becoming a student at DeVry, and then he, for a period, taught there.
Okay.
And then he got into electronic repair, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
I could have went into electronics, but I really, it wasn't for me. So.
And what did your mother's father do?
He was an aircraft architect. He would draw aircraft components, designed aircraft components for removing engines off of aircraft. A famous engine that he worked on after the service was for removing aircraft engines off of 727s.
Okay. Wow.
He worked for Boeing and I think for United Airlines for like 35 years. And
then, spoiler alert, right? You kind of did something similar. You were engineer for BNSF, the locomotive
mm-hmm.
company. So, like, you actually followed in their footsteps, kind of, relatively.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yes,
interesting.
I did. I right after I got out of the service, well, I had planned to work in some sort of industry, like I was working in on active duty. I was a machine repairman, so I was fixing equipment, mechanical. I run weld shops and then machine shops and that sort of thing. And then I operated power plants, like gas turbine power plants, so managing the plant. And then when I retired, it was kind of under a short circumstance. I ended up divorcing and became a single parent of two exceptional children, my son Aaron and my daughter Ariel.
And your son being a military member himself.
Mm-hmm.
So following in grandpa and dad's footsteps. That's impressive.
Yes. He wanted to serve. He wanted to do his part as well. But yeah, I was with the BNSF, and that was not a good match for me. And it wasn't the work. It was just the attitude. I was around people who complained at every turn. They worked harder at getting out of work than they did on their job. One thing to note is that I planned that job and I envisioned myself in that position. One position came up, I think, in 8 years, and it was mine. And I decided it was mine because where I was going to live and the house I was going to buy was essential. And it was kind of a big thing for me because I learned something from making that kind of decision. Mm-hmm. It's a very powerful, it's kind of the law of attraction stuff, you could say. I thought about it, I wrote about it, and I got the job. First try. There was nobody else that competed with me. And it was a good lesson.
Well, I'm very heavily into that aspect of setting yourself up for success on the backside. But just to tap in really kind of quick to who you were while you were in, the mindset of you came into the service from a family that had values of work ethic and good functioning attitude. You also came from a family similar to myself where you called it nomadic. And I always relate it to, that song, Papa Was a Rolling Stone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So people always ask me, like, were you a military brat? And that's what I say. Well, that song, Papa Was a Rolling Stone? That was me.
Absolutely.
So we moved around just like that. And so I learned, similar to you, the power of observation and, especially body language and what's actually being said under the words being said. So that's interesting that I see a similarity in the process of growing up into who you are today, because I really do appreciate the type of person you are. They always say to surround yourself around people that are similar in mindset and nature. But anyway, you came into the service with this mindset of being flexible and also being very in tune with your profession and your work ethic. Did that benefit you? You stayed in 21 years. Was there a point where you're like, I am not into this and I'm just kind of into this for the benefits on the back end? Or did you absolutely love the military? What was your military life like?
Well, I love the travel. It's said that the Navy, visits vast lands and gains great experiences. The men and women that are in the Navy in general. And I think it was always seeing that new shore, always waiting to embark on on travel on a new land. And there's something to be said about that I learned, and that was that there's always opportunity that you discover when it's like a vagabond will tell you that when they go to a new place, they see new chances, new opportunities. Mm-hmm. And there is something that's very important about that, because in a new environment, you aren't surrounded by the walls that we kind of erect in the place that we're fixed.
Okay.
So when we go to a new location, we see things that maybe that weren't in our perspective in the last location, because of the judgments that we've made and how we've closed ourselves down. So each time I found myself in a new environment, it was invigorating, it was inspiring. And so I was always moved to do my best. Whether it was a new ship or a new shore command, I would tell myself, here I have to do better than ever before. And in that, I was recreating myself, becoming something more each time. And it was difficult. There was nothing that was easy about it until I realized that I could set myself up for success by writing out or scripting or envisioning what it is that I was going to achieve.
So
and when I started doing that early on, it started happening for me.
What was it that was difficult about moving into a new place? I mean, you said that new environments are basically a place where there's no walls to define what I am, right? And so that was difficult. Is it because you had to recreate who you are or to prove who you are? What's difficult about that process?
Number one was the proving, but number two was the aspect that I was so familiar with, and that was trying to make new friends.
Gotcha.
I'm a friendly person, but
Gotcha.
but people having somebody new come in, there's those judgments, those apprehensions, and those type of things that arise in other people, and then consequently they arise in us because we're thinking that we're judged and all that stuff.
Yeah. So how do you overcome that?
By telling myself that it just ain't so.
Okay.
It just ain't true. It's an unreal rumination of a past lie that our mind tells us.
Okay. From some type of experience back in the day, right? I mean, if we were to break this down,
both an experiment and experience. Yes.
Yeah, if we were to break this down, I mean, that could get into the theory of mind, right? An old known association, something that I've never talked about on the show. But so do you mind kind of tapping into that? Why something can affect you today that that doesn't make sense to you today?
Yes. And that's a very great point, Robert, and thanks for bringing it up. I discovered this again when we went through our school together in the theory of mind with associations. We have these programmings that we are totally unaware of all the way through our upbringing, and then something happens, and then it's something that we know we can get through. We know that we can transition beyond, but then something holds us back. It's like we're being pulled from behind, and that's an association of something that's either a negative or a positive that we're unwilling or unable to get beyond. And that is because it's a belief system that we hold to be true. Now, whether it's true or not, we tend to believe it is, and so we basically take the feet out from underneath us and fall down instead of moving forward and beyond. Mm-hmm. And it's those positive and negative beliefs that are basically the crux of many failures. It's what happened to many people trying to move forward, whether it's out of the service or in and out of any job.
Yeah.
It's very debilitating. It has a strong hold over our ability to be successful.
Yeah. And those are the things that once we acknowledge them and notice them, no matter how long it takes, we can actually work on moving forward from them, as you said, walking, a forward path. And so you're saying that's something that helped you get out of these situations, or adapt rather to these situations these new environments that you find yourself in, acknowledging Absolutely. That there is a limitation. And that was for you telling yourself, hey, what I believe to be true right now is not actually true. It's something that I'm creating. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or it's something that I have created in the past. And then because I've ruminated about it, thought about it again and again, I made it actually bigger than the original experience or the original belief. And it's that culminating of that rumination, that thought of something that happened before or in our past. I've made it bigger and stronger and maybe a higher wall than I previously could have climbed over. Now it's so big that I don't know how I'm going to exceed that wall, or get over that wall. Yeah. And we see it all around us.
Yeah. Anxiety is pretty much the way to sum that down into layman's terms. So that's interesting. So you are in these new environments. Now you've kind of overcome that challenge of, one, proving yourself, but two, like fitting in at the same time. And now are you the leader kind of person, or are you just a mechanic? Like, how do you sit in the shadows and do your job? Who are you as a military man?
As a military man, I am the kind of guy who would make things happen. I would mentor. I was very much into mentorship because I knew that was a very big element of who I was becoming in my ascension up through the ranks.
Gotcha.
And I looked around and saw a lot of problems in leadership. And I thought that, hey, if there's a gap where people need to be mentored or motivated and empowered to be the best them they could be, then if I could just do that, then we would have a tight, cohesive unit. And that was probably one of the best things I figured out. And it really served me well because I connected with everybody, and we were very good teams in every one of those aspects or those type of roles that I was blessed to be in.
Did you have good mentors, or did you learn from bad mentors?
I did. There were certain people that I noticed, and I was an observer, and I would take in those positive traits, and I would observe positive characteristics of people, and I would say, well, I can adopt that. Kind of in a neuroscience aspect, mirroring and modeling good behavior, because there's enough of the opposite to go around. So I would, use the power of my focus and focus on those who I wanted to emulate. And when I could emulate good traits, then I could pass those on to my people and be a better leader in that realm.
So what are some good traits that mentors or leaders should have, both inside and out?
I believe that a good leader, he trains his people. He teaches his people. He allows them to bring things to his attention, allows him to have his say or her say, allowing your people to have more self-worth and counting on them and trusting them. Give them the chance to prove to you how good they are. Mm-hmm. Let them show you what it is that they want, where they want to go. And when you do that, they come alive. Your people absolutely come alive because they know that they're trusted, they know that they're valued, and they know that what they say can and will make a difference.
Okay. How many people would you say you had working under you total?
Well, it depends on two things. Number one, in collateral duties, like on an aircraft carrier, we would have a thing called repair lockers. And in one repair locker on an aircraft carrier, I had 130 people where you have to train and mentor and motivate them. And then in my work centers, I think on an aircraft carrier, I had up to 70, 75, I believe, at one time.
Gotcha.
And that was in repair division. We were really well outfitted, and this was at the time of, after September 11th. So
yeah,
those 03, 04 deployments were heavily manned with some really fantastic personnel.
Yeah. And I see that you actually deployed 3, 6, 9 times.
8 or 9 times, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of seat time.
That's a lot of seat time. And
yeah.
So at what point...
There's a lot of water out there.
I've heard stories about that. I learned how to scuba dive in Okinawa, and I tell this story about we went on a night dive, and I look back, and I see that as I kick this photoplankton, the sea just turns a bright green. And I was telling a buddy that. He's like, man, we were in, I think he said he was in near Indonesia somewhere, and at night they were on the back of the ship smoking, and the same thing. As the waves were going out, he could see like these big green lines of photoplankton being activated.
Yeah, the photoluminescence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said the things you see out in the sea, it could be boring or it could be just phenomenal. So, yeah, I bet. I was never allowed to go on the boat because I was too tall. That was a direct quote from my gunnery sergeant. So, I always thought it was against me, but when I went to the Arizona to visit, I was hitting my head. I appreciate the fact that she didn't let me get on a ship now. It would have been 6 months of hell for me.
Yeah, you would have your scalp would have a lot of scars. That's for sure.
I would be
forehead, ears, everything.
It was tragic. So you served, and then 21 years in. At what point were you like, okay, enough's enough?
Well, it was kind of a sudden thing for me. I was contemplating going limited duty officer because I was actually at the stage in my career where I was running power plants and that sort of thing, which is usually an officer, a chief officer or a warrant officer type of position where you're in charge of the engineering plant, running and operating the plant. And because I had that qualification, I was going to move into that. And also for my job description as a repair type, that was kind of the next progression, because making rank was so tight for E8 and E9 in my job field that that was to bring home more money. I was going to do that. And then the reality hit of becoming a single parent and having to make a decision right now. And I think I really screwed up in this aspect. I was going to plan as I was going through this officer candidate school and all that for my discharge and all that. And what happened was that did not happen. And so I had to react instead of respond.
Gotcha.
Too quickly. And I just decided that I would find this job here where I am now in Vancouver, Washington, and then that would work out. I wish I had planned better. And if this is helpful for anybody, every day that you're looking forward to either getting out or retiring, you should be planning on some aspect of what you want to do when you get out, because I didn't have that luxury. Well, I did, but I didn't take it as serious as I could have. Yeah. So yes, you can succeed with a short-sighted, unplanned exodus from the service, but your chances of greater successes come from planning longer and farther out and really looking at what you wanted to do and then really coming up with a solid plan.
So what was, how early did you start planning?
It was about 6 to 8 months. I was on a deployment when all this hit me, and I had a really good Charlie Oscar, our commanding officer, was great, and so he allowed me to fly out in the middle of PAC for 2 weeks and come home and do all that I had to do here. And I secured some interviews and talked to people that had an inside look at what was open or coming open in those jobs that I was searching for in BNSF.
How did you find those people?
How did I find them? I did a little bit of research. This was at the beginning of getting the internet on board vessels back in the early 2000s. We had internet and whatnot. So I did some research. I found the people, and then when I came home, I connected with them. And as soon as I retired at the end of September in 2004, it was less than 60 days, and I was working in a very good paying job for this area.
How much extra time do you wish you had?
To plan?
Yes.
Oh, probably 4 to 5 years would have been really good. But that's kind of an unrealistic expectation when you're so busy as a senior enlisted in the Navy. That's, you're on ship, you're deployed, you're not planning, you're not thinking. Some are because they have more time. Engineering, it's a lot. It's more difficult because the op tempo in your work schedule is so much more demanding.
Now, being a man who understands that things happen for a reason and things kind of take pace as they need to, saying that you could have used an extra 4 or 5 years, I know it half of it's jokingly, but some of it's serious. Mm-hmm. What do you think that you could have improved on if you had more time? Because you got out and you got the job that you wanted, right? And you got, I wouldn't say you got the trophy at the end, but things had seemingly worked out in a sense, right?
Yes, and I hear what you're saying. Had I worked more towards the goal, maybe things would have turned out a little different. Maybe I would have not. I wanted to get into a job that corresponded to the mechanical work that I knew. Okay. Now I went on a totally new learning curve, learning locomotives, but I knew diesel engines and all these other things. But then I quickly realized I wasn't doing what I wanted to do.
How quick
that
was
part
that?
Where I told you that mentoring and that motivating and empowering people.
Yeah.
After working in this mechanical field where I was beaten down a lot because of heavy work. I'm a small guy, and that was a lot of heavy work, and never backing down from those jobs. But at the same time, I was always wanting to do this altruistic type of work where I am helping other people realize what they can realize about themselves, helping them find, what works for them and that.
Okay.
That was more of who I was on the inside, and I was trying to pretend that that's not where I was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
I was that person on the inside, but the mechanical guy that knows all this stuff about mechanical jobs was sitting there beating on things, and I wanted out. And
I absolutely 1,000% understand exactly what you're saying, because, you know, I got out, I shook my hand to the clouds and I said, I will never touch another multimeter. And, 10 years of turning wrenches and fixing radars, I get right back into it for another 6 years. And I'm like, I do not want to do this. And it took me, let's say 4 years. It took me 4 years to really say, hey, this isn't where you want to be in life, and I had to do some internal searching. How long did it take you?
Well, I stayed for 7.5 years,
Ooh.
and it was something that you and I both know, a term. It's called body syndrome.
Okay.
My body was the mechanism that was responsible for me leaving where I was at. I started having problems in my hips and my knees and my feet.
Yeah.
And it was basically my body, the pain in my body and my shoulders too, was telling me that it was time to go. I was trying to leave where I was at because of number one, the weight of the things I was working with, but also the demand. Very seldom would I go a week with not having 1 or 2 16-hour shifts. And it's brutal, especially when you don't have a rest period in there like we did in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, very hard. Physically.
Body syndromes, explaining that, to simplify it, if you are a person who has, let's say you're the big brother of 3 little kids and your parents pass away, and people will say, man, you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Well, that expression is an expression until you can actually start to feel the pressure. You're starting to have back pains, maybe neck pains, and so the words that people say, you're a pain in my ass, actually,
pain in the neck.
a pain in the neck, exactly. When you'll start to actually notice your body is taking on the words. And so for those that haven't heard of body syndrome, that is kind of body syndrome dumbed down to the simplest form.
Mm-hmm.
My dogs are killing me, like you could attract the pain and sickness to yourself. Am I right?
Absolutely. Well stated. It's your organization of words being the expression of symbols and images when they are expressed verbally. Oftentimes those things, like in the analogy of the echo, the words come back to us, and then they're visited by the physical body, and then the physical body manifests those things as specific things that are correlated to the words that were used.
Yes. And so for 7 years, obviously 7 years, it didn't happen all 7 years. It grew into that. But you were dealing with a different level of work. Now you're back into wrench turning. You're away from mentoring. And you said that there were differences between the civilian world and the military. There were problems in military mentorship that seemingly transferred over to the civilian mentorship, right? And then people were complaining. Can you talk about what it was that's unattractive to somebody with a mindset like yours?
Well, in the military, in at least in my time while I was in between 83 and the end of 04, I was surrounded by people who were inspired to get the job done for 2 reasons. Number one, it was the command's mission to be deployable always. But number two, I noticed that the men and women had a greater sense of self-worth by doing their job effectively. They felt better. They were part of a team, and this team concept was where I was at in my head. Hey, we're a team. Let's get this done. That wasn't the entirety of what I experienced. And in that experience, there was a lot of resistance building up in me. I wouldn't necessarily, just go flying off at the handle, but I'm thinking here is an example of where I don't want to be. And that was the thought that kind of led to what we were speaking about a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that mindset of not wanting to do anything at all. And I'm not, for your listeners out there, I don't mean this across. It's not a blanket statement, but it was my first experience in working in a union environment, and this is not true for all unions, but the people in that situation worked harder at getting out of work than they did to do the job, sadly.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't for me. It wasn't where I was at. I was, I always like to be proud of what I did, and that was a very difficult environment.
Yeah. And so at some point you decided to make a change. At what point was that?
Yeah. Well, that was in 2012. I sold my home and I quit my job and went to school.
Now,
and I started studying psychology.
There's a fear there, right? You sold your home and then you quit your job. And so there's a lot of vets out there that want to do that. They want to make that transition. Can you talk on that transition about the fear and then what may help be successful, make somebody successful in that transition? Because, I mean, those are very big changes. One, selling your home, and then one, going right back to school and quitting your job.
Well, the first was, say again?
I said, and quitting your job.
Well, there was a couple things that I had that were advantages. Number one, I read a lot of really good material. I'm very fond of things from the early 1900s, like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And I was a fond reader of works by Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie. So I'm looking into the nuances of what it takes to get things done, and how to make something out of nothing, as Jim Rohn would say. Mm-hmm. And I put that to the test on several occasions, both before and after I got out. One of them was with my home. I took a process called scripting, and I decided to write out what I was going to get for my home and that I was going to get a cash offer within a certain amount of time. Okay. It's kind of like what you and I know as
mental bank.
That process that we learned at school.
Mental bank.
And, excuse me?
Mental bank.
Mental bank, yeah. So it's like that. So I wrote out that I will sell my home for X amount of dollars by. And I'm so happy and grateful now that I received a cash offer. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't 25 days, and I had a cash offer for my house. I was pretty nervous along that, but I stayed true to the phrase. I read it 3 or 4 times a day, and then I wrote it out right before I went to bed. And on the 25th day, I was giving myself 30 before I took extreme action, because the housing market it tanked here. Mm-hmm. But I sold my house for probably $70,000-$80,000 more than it was worth in the housing market.
Gotcha.
Because that was the number I put on that piece of paper. Yeah. The exact number is what I got as a cash offer. So for those of you who don't know about the cash offer, that's you're dealing with not having that extended period of time to wait for all the closings and everything. That cash check that somebody writes, it happens within 5 or 6 days, which is very nice. So that happened, and then the stress and strain of quitting my job, yes, it was real. I was making, pretty decent money at the time, here, it was, around 70 plus a year. And that was good money. Yeah. About twice what I was making in the Navy. However, I was very unhappy, and I had to get out the scales and weigh it out. On one hand, there was living and working in this environment and being absolutely miserable. And then on the other hand was the possibility of something better. Was it money that was better? Didn't matter as long as I was happier. And so I weighed it out, and then I made the decision. I went to school and I started learning information on more ways that I could be more effective in all the realms that I was working towards. And then that was what it took for me. I just had to make the decision. Just like when getting out, I made the decision that I was going to work at this place, even though after a couple of years I felt the discomfort of working there, but still I made the decision.
Yeah.
And there's a power in that making the decision. right or wrong, you've made it. And once you commit, that goal or whatever it is that you decide for starts to move towards you that very moment.
Yeah.
And that was very empowering for me.
I want to ask a quick question, because I don't believe that many people believe that they can achieve this word. And you talk about happiness, and you've talked about it a few times throughout the interview. And, I've actually gone back to school to chase my happiness, right? I've left a very well-paying job, and sometimes I'm like, I feel like I'm in the slums. I'm well above water in mindset, and I'm able to tread, monetarily, but leaving a big paying job is something. It's something that some people would never understand, because there are people out there that say, hey, look, you got to pay bills, right? And I argue with friends all the time. There are 1,000 people in this city right now that love what they do. Why can't I be one of those people? So can you talk about separating the ego from work to be happy and still work? Let's talk about the process of being happy with employment and why it's important, and if it's possible, because there's a lot of naysayers that they'll go to the steel plant after the service and they're like, this is how things got to get done. But I don't believe that to be true.
And they're very unhappy in it too, I might add. And you kind of you alluded to it in your book, How to Grow a Beard, which I think is a very good resource for those men and women who are getting out.
I appreciate
but
that.
You talked about how rank doesn't carry over, and there's a component to that we try to bring over into the civilian life. Gosh, I have this rank, I know this, and I have this credibility because of what I've learned. And then you get out and you're thrust into this world where, you might know it, but then you have to start at the very beginning. And then, so for me, and I hear it in you, that you came to the realization that even though there was the money and all the stuff that came with that job, there's still that internal happiness that you have to meet. You have to be able to do something that makes it better when you go home at night and say, today I might not make the money that I wanted to, or maybe I had all these papers to write, but I did something that was intrinsically more valuable than that, because all that is stuff. You can't take that stuff with you.
Exactly.
But it's more important to realize who you are becoming, what you are giving to the world, and who you are helping in the ways that you were meant to. It's like that longing to be of greater service after the service.
Yeah.
When you are serving others, that's where the growth comes from. For some, that's where there's just a magic that starts to happen when you start to see the correlation between what's possible for you when you're living out your altruistic goals, than if you're sitting there in this unhappy, unfulfilling job, beating your head against the wall, wondering why the hell you're doing this and why you haven't gotten up and decided to do what it is you want to do.
Gotcha.
That makes sense?
It makes 1,000% sense. And so you being this mentor mind and selling your house and then deciding to go back to school, you said that you decided to pursue psychology. What are the next steps after you sold your home?
Well, I went to school and I, really got into what is it that I am after. What is the essence of it? And it is, right now, I think this, I'm currently a hospice volunteer. I help people that are in the end of their life, and that's a very big task because it's a very emotional place for many people. And part of that is I am helping people find solace even in their end days. And part of my journey was to help in the way that is most meaningful in the place that I'm at. And part of the process of defining what's after this was going through this hospice training. And now I'll be working with Peace Health here in Vancouver, giving a couple of lectures and workshops on how guided imagery and grief and those kind of things, guided imagery with grief can help somebody that's both or either passing, the stages of life.
Yeah.
their life coming to an end or helping their family through it. And it's in that place of giving in that way that leads to more of a defined path. So what am I saying? So going through this process with these families and with this leads to something better, funnels me into kind of a more defined or a more condensed version of where I'm going and what I'm doing.
Yeah. And
so
you
it's
learn
kind of like another step on the ladder.
And you learn those processes through the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, or was this something that that you were practicing prior to us meeting?
I was doing a lot of research in guided imagery, and I was very fascinated because I've always known and always realized that what we can imagine, we can create, because creation is a two-step process.
Okay.
Things are always, everything that's created is seen in the mind first.
Okay.
And then it comes to the physical world. So yes.
So is that primarily the meat and potatoes with what you're doing with imagery and hypnotherapy, is helping at the hospice and helping those pass and then deal with passing with the remaining family members?
Yes, yeah, I see clients here also for hypnotherapy and guided imagery, mentoring. There's youth, younger clients that are coming out and in school and whatnot that I've seen.
Okay.
Also, a large portion of who I see in the hospice realm are veterans who are experiencing cancer. So I do the cancer work, pain relief work, helping them maybe ignite their immune system in whatever way I can. So I base it off of what that person needs at the time or what they're dealing with. Where do they want to go from where they are today? And that's kind of where I'm at with helping them.
Now, did you know about hypnotherapy? I know you were reading Napoleon Hill, which wrote the money.
Think and Grow Rich?
Think and Grow Rich. Thank you. So, and that book is sold in the millions and millions and millions worldwide. And so it never says it, but it is strictly on the power of law of attraction. Did you know about that before finding HMI?
I did. I read that book. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, so this is kind of the journey. You know about this stuff, and you're searching about stuff that, or education, some type of educational mindset where you can transfer this knowledge that has piqued your interest in healing, right? In working in the psychological field, but not as a licensed psychiatrist, and you're finding other ways to help people's minds. How did you find hypnotherapy, and can you tell us a little bit about hypnotherapy?
Well, one of the reasons that I found it was what we spoke on earlier about those walls, about those paradigms, those beliefs that simply aren't true, that we deal with and that we are faced in life and are challenged to overcome, if you will. And I thought, well, wow, I'll go to school there and I could find out some of these things that are blockages and whatnot, things that, maybe we observed or were in the presence of when we were young, and maybe it was a belief that really we don't want, but it's in there and we're trying to figure out how to get it out. So that was kind of an interest at the same time, primarily because I had read some of these books that were kind of beaten around the bush, if you will, of the topic of how the mind in a relaxed state can vent off those things that we no longer want to hold as our beliefs or a paradigm that prevents us from moving forward. And I realized that I wanted to learn more about that, because if I could help in that way, it could help some of the things that I was dealing with on my own, because like I told you, I had a very conflicted youth growing up across the West Coast.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things that I, didn't want to pack around with me as far as beliefs and paradigms. And, I think we all, throughout the course of our life, even after we learn this, we still try to work on ourselves so we can be the best person bringing the best of us ourselves forward.
Okay.
And that was, hypnosis was very interesting to me in that light.
Okay. I tell people all the time that it took me about a solid 5 to 6 months to kind of buy into it. And I'm a psych major in my background. I got my bachelor's in psychology, and I thought I was going to be a school counselor. And I was involved in a fight in the Marine Corps, and that transferred out into the civilian world, and I wasn't able to be an educator. And so that was kind of like my black hole of sorrow. And so when somebody introduced me to HMI, I was like, sure. I put it on my calendar. I was looking at it for a few, I don't know, a good solid 6 weeks. And then I finally called in one day, and the first course really talked about how I bought into psychology. So it talked about, how psych and hypnotherapy can mesh well together, because theory of mind is very similar to the mindset of the iceberg. You've got your id, your ego, and your super ego, and you've got your subconscious, your critical mind, your conscious mind. So it meshed very well, and that's kind of what stuck me around. And I learned a lot on, I don't want to say manipulation, but working, right? Like working to work with the brain or work with a client for bettering their life using just words, right? I learned a lot of what I had already been doing for so long, but now I can do it on cue. And so that's what I pulled out of HMI. But you embraced it a lot more than I did. I was looking for more structural, scientific ways to do stuff, and you were really, really trying to specify what you're getting out of this school. So as we're here now, well over a year graduated, you can talk about some of this stuff. Some of the stuff you talk about often, for instance, the power of focus and attention. Can you talk about how that translates to percentages of success?
Yes, well, the focus and attention is a huge topic, and I think it's one that we, as a society in general, we miss the mark, if you will. And that is where we place our attention. They say where attention goes, energy flows. So if our thoughts and our attention, our focus is upon things that maybe piss us off or upset us in some way, or it's something that we have the opportunity to speak on in a negative light, that has a resonance faculty to it. Okay. And so as we are focused on the negative, we are basically drawing the essence of that to ourselves, you could say. And if we would shift our focus to the things that we want, how many people, I'll ask this question, how many people do you know that will watch the news and get so spun up because of what's going on? But that's an external thing. Yeah. It's not inside them. Yeah. So they let what's going on outside them affect what's going on inside them, and then they are totally in a negative state. And then they'll go from one thing to the next that's in a negative light, and they will run throughout their day unhappy because everything that they observed brings them a state of ill repute. Mm-hmm. So if we can learn to place our focus and attention upon the things that we either are attracted to, the things that we like that bring us happiness, fulfillment, things that, you could just spend time with kids for a moment if you have kids, and they can just lift you right out of whatever stuff that you're maybe going through. I mean, I know that with my kids, and I'm sure with your son, they could just bring you right out of that. So it's like that, taking your attention and focusing and placing it on the things that will bring a lighter state. Yeah. And because with that, it puts you in a positive state of mind. Yeah. And I can't underestimate the power of focused attention, because it's taking that awareness and it's using it for cause. Because if I'm taking constantly and I'm retraining my habit, the habit is a thought we keep thinking. So if I take and I form the habit of shifting my attention, I'm using my awareness to say, this is negative, I don't want that anymore, and I shift it to something that's better. And then I keep my focus on that. I'll recreate, or I'll create a better habit. And that better habit leads to a better outcome. And that better outcome leads to putting yourself in a better polarity. Yeah. It's no secret that we live in this world and in this solar system and in this universe that is magnetically driven. We have a north and a south pole, the same with our solar system. So do we. We have a polarity to us. And if the polarity that we are attracting to ourselves is the things that are negative, we become a negative polarity. And we become a negative in the world, and so we're attracting to us negativity.
Yeah.
But if we would flip our polarity with the power of awareness to the things that we want, focusing on the outcome, seeing it from the end, then we can attract to us the positive element that we desire or seek.
Yeah.
It's like a big game of magnetics, and it's found and discovered through awareness.
And it's really, when people hear us speak on it, they lose us sometimes because of how we decide to explain it. And I wish that was never the case. And so, for people like my wife, I usually just say, I just can't let that stuff affect me. And that's as much as it boils down to. It's making a conscious choice to not let something affect you so much, and then focus your attention on where where you want it to be, not where it needs to be, not where you think life should take you, where you want it to be, where you're reaching to get. For instance, you were writing, you as in James were writing your affirmations of selling your house, and before that, the affirmations of what job you're going to land, and that's what focusing your attention means. Focus your attention onto what it is that you're trying to achieve in life, whether it be getting gains in the gym or, landing a job at, Lockheed Martin.
It's saying yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be next week. You can still focus. If your mindset is to get a job at Lockheed Martin and you go through 3 different companies to get there, you can still focus on that end goal, and that's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's in the decision. When you make the decision, you've already taken your focus, and you've basically dropped that seed in the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is impersonal and non-selective, and when you decide for something, it's like, this is what he wants.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it starts to orchestrate and help you get there because you have defined a worthy goal that's worthy for you, something that you say, you know what, this is what I want.
Yeah. Well, I know we can talk about this stuff all day because we're cut from the same cloth. But as it comes to translating that into transition, how would you help a member who's already started the transition process already, or who might be about to start, or somebody who's been out, 13 years and they're transitioning from a divorce or something? So how can you utilize what you're saying right now step by step for somebody who may just have no idea what to do today and will listen to this and say, okay, I'm going to try this out?
A great question, Robert. And I have done this with actually several people that I knew while I was active, and some that had stayed in after I had gotten out. And it was this: take a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and write down on one side of the paper all the things that you would like to do, and then on the opposite side of the paper all the things you would not like to do. Okay. And tear that piece of paper in half and throw it away, and then start lining out the things that I'd like to do, and narrow it down to the top 4 or 5. And then take a look at that list and find out if there are any prevailing wage jobs in those. And those are prevailing wage jobs are what the state mandates are set at a certain wage, and they're usually pretty high, 29 to 36 on up an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And see if there's any of those jobs in there that you would like, or maybe you'd like to start a company or a business, and just take a look at what it takes for those to happen. And by lining out and crossing out all the things that you refuse to do, you've got your focus on these few remaining tasks. And then start doing some research, start doing some homework, and maybe line by line imagine what it would be like to actually be in that job. Close the eyes, put that job on the screen of your imagination, and imagine yourself in that job. And if something comes up that's sour or something you maybe don't like, well, then move to the next one. And whatever one feels the best to you, that's an indication that that might be something that is very possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it feels good, it looks right, then pursue all the research it takes for that job and do what you can to move towards it. Mm-hmm. Because there's only one person on this entire world that can stop you, and that's yourself. That's right. There's no one else that can do it. We might be led to believe that's true, but that's actually not true. There's only one person, and that's ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I really like to leave people with is put it down on paper. Make it somewhat tangible, and then cross out all the things that you don't want.
Yeah.
Focus on the good ones. Imagine them. Make them real in your mind. Go for the one that's the best.
So if somebody's looking, if you sparked a fire and somebody wants to reach out to you today, is there a way that they can get a hold of you or in contact with you?
Yes, I have. My website's actually in being revised right now, so it's not up. But my website is inwardshypnosis.com. But I also have inwardshypnosis@gmail.com, and I like to, I get information through that email address, or they can contact me at james.klarenbach@gmail.com.
And is there anything else that you want to touch on today? I'm trying to respect your time. So if there's something that maybe you felt should have been said today and didn't get touched on, or anything that came to mind during a conversation?
Yeah, you touched on it briefly, and that was the will to meaning. I found a book that was an incredible read, and it was called The Will to Meaning. And I think it's something that a lot of folks who go through psychology and human development are often asked by their professor or such to read. And, the will to meaning is finding meaning and purpose in your life. There are many different types of things that we get wrapped up in that we're focused upon. The will to power, that's, searching and seeking power, or for money, monetary gain, or for pleasure. But in the end, they're all just, from reading his book, they're all just something that we are doing because we don't know what our life is about, what the meaning of our life is about. And what I've come to discover that most of the suffering in the world is because a lot of people, myself included for many years, was searching for meaning. What's this life about? Going to work and coming home and then, flipping on the TV? Yeah. That's not what life is.
Yeah.
It's something more. And when you start to ask those questions about what does life mean to me? What is the culmination of my life? You'll start to get some profound insights. And those insights can lead you to some greater discoveries for yourself. It's not about anyone but you, but we could get stuck into this, what Frankl describes as a Sunday neurosis, where we just are on the hamster wheel of life. Yeah. But there's something more.
Yeah.
And when you're doing it for others, you're contributing in some greater way. It develops a meaning that's profound.
Yeah.
And whatever that is for you, that's what makes a difference for everyone. When a person's living the truth of their meaning in whatever way or shape or form that is.
Yeah.
Because I think actually it makes the world a lot better place. There'll always be divisive elements in our world, but when a person has meaning, then their life moves forward without a lot of, there's always going to be struggle, but it's not as bad when there's meaning.
Yeah. And, to kind of wrap that up, we went to school together, but we still keep up on Facebook. And you mentioned a lot when I'll post something of my son, and he's like, he being you, enjoy these moments. And I absolutely 1,000% understand what you mean by that, because when I was in my 6-year company job, I wasn't enjoying those moments, and being able to take some time back and that will to meaning that drives my life is, more family now, that my sacrifice is not for core God and country anymore. It's for the Graves household. And so I completely understand that. And I know what that feels like, because it took a long time for me to get there, but I've experienced that meaning, that drive now. So I do appreciate you saying that and spreading that, because people need to hear it. As quote foo-foo and all organically hippie as it sounds sometimes, I mean, it's when you experience it and you get it. So
right.
Yeah, but there's one last question I have that I've been asking most guests. I felt that you had a story to give to somebody. Do you feel like there's a vet out there that has a story that maybe somebody on that getting out or who has already gotten out will benefit from hearing?
Yes, I think there's countless veterans out there that are getting out, and they're bombarded by what society tells them. They're bombarded by what the news tells them.
Do you
friends, family?
Do you have a vet in mind that would probably want to be on this show?
I do. I do. I can send him your way if you'd like. Absolutely.
You can call him out right now so I can tell him to listen. No, you don't have to. It's funny. It's fine. Yeah. But that's kind of what I'm trying to get somebody to call people out and for it more like a fun thing. But I do appreciate your time today, and I appreciate your time always. So thank you for all the conversations we've ever had, and just being a person that I feel comfortable referring to, or just being a person I feel comfortable referring to as a friend, so for an ear to listen to. So I don't even know what to say right now. So I have the worst time wrapping up these podcasts. So it's a lesson that's being learned in the process of continuing to make them. But James, it was a pleasure. I thank you for coming on. You're the vet. And I wish you nothing but success and continued super journeys on these snowy mountains and just living life. So I've learned a lot from you. I've taken a lot from you, and I hope that people take a lot from this conversation. So
great. It's been nice talking to you too, and did a great job on your book, by the way. And
I appreciate that.
I loved it.
So
good information. Definitely great information in there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen, this is You're the Vet. I am Robert Graves, and this is James Klarenbach. We will have you on your way, but until the next episode, enjoy the rest of the week. Take care.